Welcome to this short video on MDX, the Multi-Dimensional Expressions language. This is a query language rather like SQL, but you'll see it's specifically designed for cubes. For this video, we've already set up a very small cube with just two different dimensions. The product dimension has various things available to it, of which we've put the product type and the subtype in detail within a hierarchy we've called products. And dates, although there are many things that could have gone into the menus on the Excel spreadsheets, we've chosen to limit it to just some of these, and then a hierarchy which has years, within those months, within those weeks, and within those weeks a specific date, and we've called the hierarchy dates. So, a single cube with just two dimensions in this example. So let's first use a query, and then later we'll show how we set this up. To use a query, we go into the cube browser area and have a look at what measures we have. In this cube we've only got totals, so let's ask the total and then look at how we might analyse this. For example, we could look at the different sorts of products we sold, so let's use the products dimension. We can see all the different sorts of product types, the different groups the types are in, and the individual product. Finally, the number of products sold from each of those. Let's come out of that and look at the same for dates. So we could take our dates hierarchy and split up exactly the same data and see when they were sold. So we can see for the different calendar years, for the different months, for the different days, how many products were sold. But now let's show you how those individual things were generated. And to do that, we'll switch into the design mode. To create a query, I will type in select something, we'll specify this in a minute, to cover the rows, and something, again we'll specify what in a moment, for the columns. From, and where's the data going to come from? We're going to get it from my cube. I'll make the writing for this bigger as soon as we get past what the results look like. So the thing that we would like to have in the column is the total volume of sales. So we could take the total volume and drag and drop it into the appropriate place. And then let's analyse by dates, so we'll take the whole of the date hierarchy and place it. But at the moment, although we've taken the dates hierarchy, we've not said how detailed a level to drill into, so we'll specify that specifically by putting the actual date. So whenever we choose to run this, we will see the totals separated out into all the individual dates. There we go. And that's back to as we had it drag and drop. And in fact, you'll find it makes absolutely no difference if we specify rows and columns the other way round. We could have the columns first and then specify the rows, but when we execute that, then we get back to exactly the same result. Over the next few slides, we're going to show the MDX code more clearly. And let's start with the example we've just been looking at in the package. You can see from this code that we've specified something to show on columns and something to show on rows. The columns is the easy one to explain. We're going to show the totals from the measures. But have a look at the on rows section more carefully. This is the one that says dim date, dates, date. The dim date comes because we're going to be using the date dimension to show things on each row. We could have several hierarchies within the date dimension, Our one is called dates. And finally, we can set what level we want to see in the query. In this example, we'd like to see every date listed out, so we name date as the level. And this gives the display that we wanted. But look again at level controller. At the moment, we have this set to date, but we could change this to year. And now when we run the query, we see the same totals, but this time they are aggregated to the year level. Or we could seek to look at the data at the month level. So again, it is dim date, because that's the dimension we're using. The hierarchy is called dates, but this time we've set the level to month. The query we are showing will show all months, but we can be specific. We've now added June 2010, and we'll get data back just for that specific month. But remember, a key point about the hierarchies is they store the data in a structured order. So as well as just talking about June 2010, it does make sense to the MDX system to talk about the next member after June. If we extend the query to say June 2010 next member, the query will return July. Or indeed, we could talk about the previous member, and the previous member to June 2010 is May 2010. Can you see how this is going to be useful to the analyst? If they already know how a particular month's performed, MDX gives them a facility for comparing against the previous or the next months. This makes looking for business trends much easier. But it's more powerful than that. We've now edited the query to mention the parent of June 2010. And because of the structured nature of the calendar, MDX is able to work out that the parent of June 2010 is the whole calendar year 2010. Hence it can return the entire year's sales. And even further, we could extend our query not to just ask for the parent of June 2010, but to ask what the children of that whole year was. And that would be January, February, March, April, all the way through to December of 2010. So MDX is giving us a way, if we name a month, it will tell us all the different sales values within the year of that month. And that gives a really useful facility for being able to tell the context of a particular month's sales. Actually, before we move on, although we can ask for the children of parents, this is such a common expression that the word siblings, brothers and sisters, is allowed. But let's stick with the parent-children version. Now that you've got an understanding that you can ask for the parent-child, we could ask for the first child of whichever month we happen to be evaluating. So for June 2010, the parent is 2010, the first child is going to be January 2010. This is going to allow the analyst to compare the current sales against the sales at the beginning of the year. Can you see that this is a really useful facility that business people will often want to do? But perhaps they want a little bit more than this. They may not just want to compare the current month, let's say June, against January. They want to look at all the months between now and the beginning of the current year. And MDX gives a facility periods to date. This is an important function, so let's look at it in more detail. Just like the earlier queries, when we could set the level, within the periods to date, we can talk about which periods, for example, year, month, week, and so on. In this slide, we are choosing to look at the year. And then on the second line, we are giving it a particular date, April the 16th, 2010. And when we execute this, we will get all the dates back between 1st of January and April the 16th, in whichever year we happen to have chosen. But now let's switch the level to month, but keeping the date the same. Now when we run the query, we get all the different dates, but only within the current month. So in effect, we are running a month to date rather than a year to date function. The advantage of running the same function, which is periods to date, is it makes it very quick to switch from analysing for a specific year to analysing for a specific month. And we can illustrate this point by showing that in our hierarchy we had year, month, we then had the week of the year. And all we need to do is change the level control to week of year, and now we're going to see the sales within the current week. Can you see that as we drill up and down the data, all we need to do is change the level control within the same query, and that enables us to get to the different displays of data. Elsewhere in the module, you used Excel to drill into the data, and as you clicked a plus sign to expand a particular row, you were dropping down into the next level. Behind the scenes, Excel is connecting to the cube, and all it is doing when you press the plus symbol is it's looking up the next level of detail within the hierarchy and dropping down that one level. Now we're going to look at one further MDX function, which is parallel period. Very often in business, you want to find out whether your company is doing better or worse than the same period last year, or the same period last month. And the multi-dimensional expressions for this contain three parts. The first is the level of the hierarchy that you're looking back. So for example, you might be looking back year. Secondly, it's how many steps to go backwards in the hierarchy. To go back just 1 year, put 1. To go back 5 years, put 5. And finally, what date are we comparing from? So in this example, we are comparing from April 2011. Well, that's April 2010. Can you see how powerful this query is? During this module, you may be setting up an analysis of data to look to see whether there are trends over time. One of the measures that you are very likely to include into your cube will be the money earned by your various sales. Now what you can do is introduce a second measure that uses the parallel period function to list out the sales value of the equivalent period exactly 1 year before. Then, as soon as you have a display with two columns side by side representing the different years, it becomes easy to work out the difference between those, for example by subtraction, to see whether you have a positive or negative number representing a growth or fall in sales. So, let's summarize the multi-dimensional expression language. It's deliberately designed to look something like SQL or SQL. That means it's much quicker to learn. The rows and the columns represent the different dimensions, with the cells or the insides of the spreadsheet represent the measures. We saw listing dates and products as the dimensions, and then the sales value as the measure. MDX integrates very effectively with hierarchies. It understands the concepts of levels, and within a level it understands the concept of the next or the previous entry. So for example, from April you could talk about the next month. Or you could talk about the parent of a particular level. You can talk about the children of any particular level. You can talk about the first child. You can talk about the last child. Two particularly useful functions are period to date and parallel period. Period to date will list all the data from first child up to now. Parallel period will look back in time for this particular slot that far back. So, we've finished the class in MDX, and it should be clear to you that it is a query language that is specifically designed for processing cubes and has many powerful facilities. Thank you for attending this class.